Good evening. Each year, the Consulate General of Israel in New York, together with the Jewish National Fund and the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, commemorates the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. The Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Award is given to individuals who have followed in the footsteps of the late Dr. King, bettering society and showing moral courage and leadership.
Start by saying, how are you doing? I wouldn't do my job correctly if I wouldn't teach you how to say it in Hebrew. Makaway is in Hebrew. I should try and do it as a video content so I get extra points for accent. You know, that's what
This is such a special day.
Dr. King and the Jewish people had a warm joint history going back to the Selma to Montgomery marches, where Rabbi Heschel walked side by side with Dr. King. Dr. King was a great supporter of the State of Israel. During lengthy remarks on stage at the conservative movement's rabbinical assembly in 1968, less than 2 weeks before his assassination, he said, "Peace for Israel means security, and we must stand with all of our might to protect its right to exist, its territorial integrity. I see Israel, and never mind saying it, as one of the great outposts of democracy in the world, and a marvelous example of what can be done, how desert land almost can be transformed into an oasis of brotherhood and democracy. Peace for Israel means security, and that security must be a reality." These remarks echoed sentiments he included in a letter sent to Adolf Held, president of the Jewish Labour Committee, the year before, which clarified his strong position for Israel at a time when some were calling to censure the Jewish state.
The whole world must see that Israel must exist and has a right to exist and is one of the great outposts of democracy in the world.
In a 1967 letter to Israel's then Prime Minister Levi Eshkol, Dr. King expressed his excitement about visiting the Holy Land. "I am certainly looking forward to the trip," he wrote, "with great enthusiasm." Israel, in turn, enthusiastically supports the legacy of Dr. King. In 1978, the Jewish National Fund established a forest in the Galilee in Israel's north in honor of Dr. King, and more recently, one nearby in the memory of the late Coretta Scott King. His influence on the Jewish people and Israel is such that Israel even has streets named after Martin Luther King. Dr. King's tireless pursuit of peace and justice has perhaps added poignancy in the wake of the tragic and horrific attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. While we continue to mourn the untimely loss of one of America's greatest sons, we like to think Dr. King would have taken some pleasure in the way in which the victims of the Pittsburgh attack and the victims of the 2015 Charleston shooting at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church came together to comfort each other. It was a moving example of how the legacy of Dr. King's work in the civil rights era lives on into the present day, and how close the Jewish and African American communities truly are in America.
Here today, during Black History Month, we are presenting the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Award to Dr. Torian Eastonlink, New York City Health First Deputy Commissioner, the Honorable Rodneyse Bichotte Hermelyn, New York State Assemblymember, and Errol Lewis, Spectrum News, New York One political anchor.
Shalom and good afternoon to all. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the annual celebration of Black History Month and tribute to the life and legacy of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., sponsored by the Consulate General of Israel in New York, the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, and the Jewish National Fund. I am Michael Miller, the Executive Vice President and CEO of JCRC-NY. During our program, as we honor 3 distinguished and deserving honorees, representing the tangible fulfillment of Dr. King's dream, as well as hear some of his powerful words, we will seek to underscore the indelible influence that Dr. King has had on us, our lives, and our society. To open our program, I have the privilege of presenting for his message the Acting Consul General of Israel in New York, a quintessential diplomat and a very dear friend of so many of us. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Israel Nitzan.
Thank you very much, Michael. Year after year, Israelis, Jews, and African Americans meet in what has become an annual tradition of togetherness, of shared values, and of common dreams. We meet in good times and in bad times. We meet in celebrating things that unite us and make us stronger. This evening, we meet to pay tribute to a man whose vision has deeply affected all of our lives, the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. It is hard to believe that Dr. King was assassinated over 50 years ago, and yet no sound has carried further America to the most distant corners of the world, and also from here, from New York to Jerusalem, than his warm and dramatic voice of dignity and reason. When reading some of Dr. King's powerful speeches, realize time and again how deeply rooted they were in our biblical themes, in the values and beliefs that have enabled the Jewish people to continue down the long and often difficult path of history. The shared legacies of the Jewish and African American peoples have united our communities, as we have both struggled to move on from a past filled of persecution. We have both endured injustice and oppression and even physical violence. And as all of us share the belief that God created mankind in his own image, we need to stand up today and always against racism, against anti-Semitism, and to seek out a future of promise and unity. As we heard in the video earlier, it was just 10 days before his assassination that Dr. King said, "I see Israel as one of the great outposts of democracy in the world, and a marvelous example of what can be done, how desert can be transformed into an oasis of brotherhood and democracy. Peace for Israel means security, and that security must be a reality." Dr. King understood what we all understand or need to understand now, that peace is a moral imperative and an existential need, and it is based on security. He understood that the Jewish people will flourish in Israel, our ancient homeland, by exercising our collective right for self-determination. Likewise, we all understand, and today we commemorate the historic role of the civil rights movement in ensuring that African Americans, like all Americans, can and should be able to exercise their individual and civil rights in the country they called home. While we have come a long way over the years, both in America and in Israel, we still have a lot of work ahead of us. So during these days of a pandemic and increased social challenges, it is even more peril that we work together to empower our communities and to create a better understanding of our histories as well as our futures. So thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you very much, Consul General Nitzan, for your most important words. I now have the pleasure of introducing for greetings, Deborah Riegel, President of the New York Board of the Jewish National Fund of the JNF. Deborah?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Michael. It is my honor to represent Jewish National Fund USA, where I serve as president of the New York region. And if there is one image that captures the popular understanding of the Jewish community's relationship to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., it is from Selma in 1965. It's the image of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel linking arms with a line of activists that include Dr. King on their historic march to Montgomery. And Rabbi Heschel's comment at the conclusion of that march has taken on similarly iconic status when he said that he felt his legs were praying. As you heard in the video, on a hill in biblical Galilee overlooking areas where Jesus preached, thousands of trees have been planted in a forest named in honor of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. The forest was established by Jewish National Fund in 1976 with the ceremonial planting of 39 trees, symbolizing each year of Dr. King's all too short life. Since then, hundreds of trees have been added to the forest each year, and the forest has grown from 39 trees to over 10,000, one of which was planted by Dr. King's son when he visited Israel in 1987 and said that the tree symbolizes the continuity of his father's mission. In 2007, an initiative to plant a second forest in the northern Galilee of Israel in memory of Coretta Scott King was launched in Washington, D.C. at a ceremony held at the Faith Tabernacle United Holy Church as a living memorial to her legacy of peace and justice. As a high school student, I recall studying Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, and those words are as relevant to us today as they were on August 28th, 1963, when he said, "We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. There is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment." And so today, in commemoration of Dr. King's birthday and in celebration of Black History Month, we continue to grow the King Forest by planting new trees. And with this, we continue to build on the ties between our communities that were forged in the civil rights movement. And we continue to work together to build a world where all men and women can sit together at the table of brotherhood and be judged only by the content of their character. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Deborah, for those beautiful words. We now transition to the award presentation to our three distinguished honorees. And to do such, I thought that I'd also quote from Dr. King from one of his speeches where he said, "Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be a sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or fail. Be the best of whatever you are." And the three individuals who we're honoring this evening are truly the best. I have the privilege of presenting the first award to my friend, Errol Lewis. Errol is one of the most well-known journalists in New York and beyond, the savvy political anchor of Spectrum News New York One, and accomplished host of Inside City Hall. With degrees from Harvard and Yale, there isn't a more cerebral, better researched TV news personality on the New York scene, and his show is truly the threshold for getting inside City Hall and the ever-evolving political panoply of this dynamic metropolis. If you want to get someplace in the New York political scene, an appearance on his show is a must. But I got to know Errol on the 2015 JCRC mission to Israel, in which he participated together with his spouse, Juanita Scarlett. Errol absorbed everything we experienced from the Golan Heights and Lebanese border to Sderot on the border of the Gaza Strip, from Tel Aviv to the narrow streets of the old city of Jerusalem. I don't know what message he put on the paper he slid into the crevices of the Western Wall, but his success is truly an embodiment of the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Errol, you are so deserving of this award that we are conferring upon you today. Thank you for accepting it, and I turn it to you for a response.
Wow, thank you very much, Michael. I have nothing but fond memories of that trip in 2015 and floating in the Dead Sea and seeing all of the spots that we'd all read and prayed and dreamt about as young people, the biblical sites. And I'll never forget that trip. And my wife, Juanita, I know feels the same way. I thank you very much for this award. Like anybody else who grew up in this era, I dimly remember Martin Luther King Jr. himself. I much more remember the way my parents and everyone around me reacted to him, and of course to the tragedy of his assassination. And I will only say then, if there's any piece of his ministry and his life and his impact on the world that you see in me, I am honored. And I thank you very much for this award.
Thank you very, very much, Errol. And we're so pleased that you're able to join us and to actually be the recipient of this important award. It's now my pleasure to introduce my JCRC colleague, my longtime JCRC colleague, Rabbi Bob Kaplan, Director of the Center for Community Leadership at JCRC, who will present the next award. Rabbi Bob.
Thank you so much, Michael. And of course, my deepest regards to both Rodneyse and to Errol. As we remember the life and legacy of Dr. King, I'd like to take just a brief moment also to remember the more than 2.5 million that have fallen from COVID, this horrific virus, and the tens of millions that have been affected by it. Just a brief moment. Thank you. Dr. King, in March of 1966, more than a half a century ago, said, "Of all forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane." Healthcare is a right. And all that we share this incredible country with, this incredible world with, have a right to have that kind of healthcare. Unfortunately, we have seen through the lens of COVID-19, the impact, the tragic impact of healthcare disparities in the number of people from communities of color, immigrant populations, and others that have died disproportionately or been disproportionately affected by this horrific disease. Fortunately, in New York City, we have a leader. We have someone who is a true spiritual disciple of Dr. King, a man of influence, a man of captivation, integrity, and these are words that I didn't come up with, his friends did, that has taken a lead in ensuring that equity in healthcare is a mission that he will complete in our city. Dr. Torian Eastonlink serves as the first deputy commissioner and the chief equity officer of the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. As in this role, he has operationalized the health department's vision and mission by coordinating a united response across the agency to its public health priorities and to COVID. He leads implementation of an anti-racist public health practices, including the agency's internal Race to Justice program, and oversees the health department's Take Care New York initiative, which centers community collaboration to reimagine neighborhood health. With a Bachelor of Science from Morehouse, a Doctor of Medicine from Rutgers, and a Master of Public Health from Mount Sinai, Dr. Easterling has truly risen to this tragic challenge that is before us. It is with great pride and deep thanks that we now present this award to Dr. Torian Eastonlink.
I'm deeply humbled, Rabbi Kaplan, for the introduction. Deeply humbled to be receiving an award. And certainly as you read that introduction, I was actually wondering who you were speaking of. I think that there is so much to be thankful for this year, even in the unprecedented, chaotic moment that we are in. Let me first just start off briefly just thanking the Honorable Errol Lewis for also his remarks, the partnership with the Jewish Community Relations Council in the work of the Jewish National Fund. I think, what I'll say about this moment that we're in and the work, first and foremost, I have to thank my wonderful colleagues, over 6,000 individuals who are working for the agency that we call our New York City Department of Health, one of the largest public health departments in this country, who have been on the front line from the very beginning, who I owe all of their tireless work, and for there is nothing that I was able to do without them. And certainly all of my colleagues who are healthcare. One of the questions that I have asked certainly during this time, and I think this really remarks the moment of honoring the life of Dr. King, certainly many times certainly during the summer, that question rings so true. And I think, the time and the partnership that I've been able to work with JCRC and so many others, particularly within the Orthodox Jewish community, has really amplified the importance of having a shared dream, of understanding that a beloved community can only be reached by collective action. And I certainly see that has been the work that we've been trying to achieve together, making sure that we're doing outreach into the community. So with that, I take a pause and just want to thank you again for the honor of receiving this award, and also to share the stage with Mr. Lewis, as well as my Brooklyn Democratic Party leader, the Honorable Rodneyse Hermelyn. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Easterling. We're really honored to have you as part of this ceremony. And now, once again, I want to call on Consul General Nitzan to make the presentation to our third honoree. Consul General.
It is my honor and pleasure to present the 2021 MLK Award to our third honoree, Honorable Rodneyse Hermelyn. In addition to being a member of the New York State Assembly, she has long been an advocate in promoting tolerance and existence. She has been a strong leading voice in fighting anti-Semitism, racism, and hatred in the diverse borough of Brooklyn, as well as throughout New York City and the state of New York. Her work and leadership are so important and so crucial, especially these trying times today. A true friend of the state of Israel, Assemblymember Bichotte Hermelyn visited Israel in a JCRC trip in 2011. She saw firsthand the diversity of the Israeli society and its true democracy. And we value, here at the consulate, we value so much her friendship and support. So it is with great honor we present the 2021 award that states, on this day, February 28th, 2021, in commemoration of the birthday of late Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and in the celebration of Black History Month, trees have been planted in the Martin Luther King Jr. forest in Israel, recognizing Honorable Rodneyse Hermelyn, esteemed member of the New York State Assembly and community advocate, for her outstanding leadership, dedication to the community, passion towards helping others, and her commitment to the dream of freedom and equality which unites all people. Presented by the Consul General of Israel in New York, the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, and the Jewish National Fund, February 28th, 2021, 16 Adar, 5781. Assembly member, it's a great honor to present this award, please.
Thank you so much, Consul General Israel Nitzan. Thank you so much for such a warm and welcome. It's great. I am deeply honored. Again, my name is Assemblymember Rodneyse Bichotte Hermelyn. I represent the 42nd Assembly District, which includes Flatbush, East Flatbush, Midwood, and Ditmas Park, and also the first woman to chair the largest Democratic Party in the state of New York, with over 1.1 million Democrats across Kings County and Brooklyn. Today, we are celebrating Black History Month, and I want to acknowledge and thank the Jewish leaders who have made this evening possible. Again, Israel Nitzan, thank you. You are the Acting Consul General of Israel in New York. Thank you so much. Michael Miller, who's been a great friend for all these years. Thank you so much. the Executive Vice President of JCRC, Rabbi Kaplan, thank you so much, who's been on the ground helping us get together from one faith to another faith. Thank you so much. Deborah Regal, President of the New York Board of JNF. And I want to acknowledge my fellow honorees, Errol Lewis, who is the host of Inside City Hall, and we work side by side. I would like to say that he also went to Brooklyn Law, okay? He said all those great institutions, but Brooklyn Law, that's where I attend as well. And Dr. Torian Eastonlink, who's the first Deputy Commissioner of New York City Department of Health. And I want to say thank you for all the work that you do, especially as it relates to Black maternal health. I am really deeply honored. I'm excited and grateful to JCRC for honoring me in Black History Month in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s name. I am also excited because today, when we are celebrating diversity in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s name, I have found in my experiences representing and championing the interests of many diverse groups that we have a lot in common. We all share concerns about opportunity and equality, and we all have overcome adversity and have a shared commitment to civic engagement and fostering tolerance. I want to thank JCRC for honoring me with my first experience in Israel, where the most memorable part of my visit in Israel was Yad Vashem Museum. It was there I felt when I was reading the history, I was living the history. I was moved by everything that the Jewish people had endured, those who survived and those who were executed. And as I was there, I cried as I reflect on slavery across the world, think about slavery and what my ancestors went through, and how racism and anti-Semitism and hatred continues to exist today here in America. I have a personal bond with the Jewish community, not because I represent a large Jewish constituency base, not because Haiti, I'm Haitian American, Haiti had opened its borders to Holocaust survivors, of which I was in connection with one. His name is Bill Moore, and he created the Haiti Holocaust group because he remembered when Haiti opened the borders to him, and when we had the earthquake in Haiti, he decided to open up Haiti Holocaust and commemorate Haitians and Jews who are like-minded in making the world a better place with Tikam Alam Awards. And it's not because Israel also was the first country to roll out a full medical operation to aid hundreds and thousands of Haitians who were devastated in Haiti. They came out and rolled out and helped so many Haitians. And it's not because Haiti was the deciding vote for making Israel a nation. And it's not because JCRC have formed the Haitian Jewish Coalition with a lot of community organization, which helped me be where I am right now. And it's not because my late son was half Jewish and Haitian, and his spirit gave me the strength to roll out a bill in his namesake called Jonah Bichotte Cowan Bill, which addresses maternal health risk. And as a mother who lost her son, preterm labor, I fought, and that spirit, his spirit still lives with me, fought to make sure that Black women, as we talk about disparities and how the disparities are so huge when it comes to the Black community, Black women are still enduring high rates of mortality, maternal mortality rates and infant mortality rates. It's more in the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King that we're working together for equality and equity. And as we look forward, we must combat racism, anti-Semitism, and hatred. So we let his legacy, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy, live. We let his legacy live as we rise together to the mountaintop together. So I look forward to celebrating and working continuously the Jewish American Heritage Month in May, and so many other events that we look forward to in bringing our communities together. Thank you. This is a great honor.
Thank you very, very much, Assemblywoman Rodneyse Bichotte. I certainly vividly remember our trip in 2011, and she continually reminds me that she was then a district leader, but now she's an Assemblywoman. So we owe her one in her new capacity, and particularly as the Democratic leader in Kings County. It's now my great pleasure to call on one of my closest clergy colleagues and dearest friends, Associate Pastor of Canaan Baptist Church in the city of Harlem, a past Vice President of 100 Black Men and one of the founders of Eagle Academy for Boys, Reverend Jacques-Andre de Graaf. Rev, as we lovingly call him, as a student at Morehouse College as a young man, met Dr. King, which was the turning point in his life. He is a past recipient of our Martin Luther King Award and will now share with us some inspirational words written and spoken by Dr. King.
My dear brother, before I begin, first of all, thank you for this honor. I want to acknowledge the sponsorship of this great tradition from the Israeli Consulate, the Jewish National Fund, and of course, JCRC. And this is a special bittersweet moment because this is Michael Miller's last time as presiding in his current position. You have become a New York institution. We can't replace you. We can celebrate you and try to build on the foundation that you have established. I want to say to Errol Lewis in particular that we salute you, and we have been praying for your family and your loss. Your father would be proud of you today. It was my privilege to meet Martin Luther King and Benjamin Mays at Morehouse, and then later to work with my mentor, Reverend Wyatt T. Walker, who was Martin Luther King's chief of staff. And he would have said that this is a dark time of troubled time in America because there are those who seek to divide us. At another time in America when we were divided institutionally, politically, policy-wise, programmatic-wise, there was a march on Washington. And on August 28th, 1963, Martin Luther King spoke the words that I'm about to read. I won't read all of them. Many of them you already know and have heard, some even this evening. And at the end, I'll bring it forward to the 21st century and this moment with some words of my own. Martin Luther King on August 28th began with these words. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared by the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro was still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro was still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in an exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise to Black men and women, as well as white men and women, that they would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note. Insofar as citizens of color are concerned, instead of honoring this sacred tradition, this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vault of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and security and of justice. We have come also to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time for our nation to rise from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of bedrock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of this moment. That was then, but this is now. We have gone from we shall overcome to glory. Today we must stand against demonic forces, America, like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, that are new voices for hatred and intolerance. They're new faces, but old voices. We must continue to stand with our Jewish brothers and sisters who have traveled with us on the struggle against hate and violence. Our fight today must be against racism, anti-Semitism, and poverty. And we must also fight for voting rights. We cherish today the vital ideals of Martin Luther King, and now we must work together to ensure their permanent implementation. For America, when we do these things, we can rest assured in the knowledge that the best is yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rev. It's just always a pleasure and an inspiration to hear you. I now have the opportunity of having a brief conversation with our three honorees. I'll see if I can get them up, or our tech people can get them up on the screen. And as we do that, if I can ask you, I have two of three, hopefully the third will be there in a moment, but if you have everybody's up. If you have the award, would you mind just lifting up the award so we can just show everybody how beautiful it is? The same one that Wendy Williams was holding up. And we thank the Jewish National Fund for contributing the trees that were planted in honor of our honorees, and the inscription as well that you heard from Consul General Nitzan. In the few minutes, thank you very much for that. In the few minutes that we have together, what I'd like to start off with is use the words that Assemblywoman Bichotte referenced, and that is, let his legacy live, let Martin Luther King's legacy live. I'm going to quote for each one of you a different a verse or sentence from one of Dr. King's either speeches or for something that he had written. And I'd love to hear from you what this means to you. So I'm going to start with Dr. Easterling. In one of his speeches, Dr. King said, "Out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. Out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope." And I thought that was appropriate considering the role that you're playing, Dr. Easterling. But what does that expression mean to you?
Yeah, I think it is so timely, and I think it is very easy for us to focus on this pandemic, in the despair that it has caused, the lives that it has lost, the impact that it has. And certainly, I think that we need to first make sure that we are acknowledging these longstanding inequities that we knew had existed, addressing racism and oppression, as our Honorable Assemblywoman had mentioned. But we need to make sure that we're also talking about the amazing work that folks are doing in their communities. I think that this is an opportunity for us to reimagine how our public health infrastructure is really caring for and protecting the lives of New Yorkers. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to have a conversation about the opportunity that we can think about not only surveillance, but the opportunity to really have resources in our communities to do direct services, ensuring that our healthcare systems can support our communities. I would also say that this vaccine has been a hope. It has been a long year And we have just come upon the moment where the first case in New York City, where we've already passed that year mark. And I think we're now at a time where we can actually say that there is hope of getting to the end of this pandemic. We certainly have some ways to go, but there's hope there.
Yeah, there certainly is. Thanks. And in addition, this virus has also been a great equalizer. It doesn't distinguish between, yes, there are disparities, but it does not distinguish between anyone in terms of their age, in terms of their race, in terms of their economic status, and the work that you and the Department of Health are doing is truly extraordinary in servicing all of us, all New Yorkers, and we thank you for that. I now want to turn to, I have to decide which I'm going to go to next, but I'll go to Rodneyse. So Assemblywoman Bichotte, let me read you the following quote. There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must take it because conscience tells him it is right. How does that expression by Dr. King impact on you and the work that you do?
It seems like that question was directly made for me.
That's correct.
Well,
I'm sure that Errol is worried as to what I'm going to be quoting for him.
Right. Well, I would say, you know, I've been in many situations where I had to make decisions that were unpopular. Even being the Democratic County Chair, being the first woman, first Black, and having to come into a situation where I have to try to reform and change and try to bring people together. It's hard. It's really hard. But the reality is, you know, we are leaders because we need to be in a position where we stand on something. You know, we stand on faith, we stand on truth, we stand on democracy, and we stand on equity. And there's been many times in my role as, you know, whether it was a district leader, assembly, or even just a woman, I had to stand up. And one thing I would like to bring to fruition is being molested as a child. That was something that was not popular to come up forward when I was on the assembly floor. And when people heard that I was a victim of child sex abuse, other legislators got up and spoke. They're like, oh my God, she spoke, I wanna speak. I wanna speak. And so the power of standing up when something is unpopular is very powerful, because you will realize that there are commonalities in the room. People are struggling in the same manner that you are. People had the same struggles, the same challenges. And so speaking up for what's right is what Martin Luther King, I believe, died for.
And also speaking your conscience. And I think that you have done just that in the role that you're playing. So now I'll turn to Errol. I think you'll appreciate that this one, you probably know it, but rarely do we find men who willingly engage in hard, solid thinking. There is an almost universal quest for easy answers and half-baked solutions. Nothing pains some people more than having to think. And considering the role that you play as a journalist, as an interviewer, what does that expression by Dr. King mean to you?
Oh, well, yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, Michael. I traffic in half-baked solutions. I get them. I get them every day. I sort them. I try and slice and dice them. I try and reject them when possible. But look, you raise a really important point. It's a big, complicated society. We've got really, really serious problems. I think the pandemic brought home to people in a way that, you know, I've never seen in my lifetime before, how important it is that you have leadership and community support of that leadership that's based on thoughtful reflection, careful strategy, solid values, that, you know, that quick solutions can lead you into real danger, life-threatening danger, as it turns out. When I hear people saying in our big complex city, oh, the answer is easy. Well, I flinch a little bit, because if it was easy, it would have been done. There's 8 million of us. Right. All the easy stuff has been done.
Right.
And I try and urge that, directly, sometimes with a smile, sometimes not with a smile, with the many politicians and would-be politicians that I deal with, that, this is hard. This is not simple stuff, that you've got to come into this with the right spirit. And you've got to expect, in a lot of cases, that really frustrating place where I know Dr. Easterling knows about, where you take the information, the incomplete information you have, you make the best assessment that you possibly can, and you go forward with a good strategy. A good strategy that fails is better than a bad strategy or a hunch that happens to work out, because you can't do that over and over again. And so the search for solutions in leadership on issues like the one I keep bringing up that never gets quite enough attention, but this is the perfect forum to mention it, which is the enduring, tragic, and unacceptable racial segregation of our neighborhoods and our public schools. This requires some solutions. It requires some thought. It requires some research, and that's the precondition after which you have to sort of really deal with some hard questions of values, people's beliefs, and wanting to share the resources of the society more equitably. The moral question that a lot of people understand is there, but a lot of folks just overlook the pure, rigorous, intellectual, sometimes dry and boring process of trying to assemble facts, speak to experts, respect those experts, not just tolerate them, draw on their insights and try and work together. And I love the fact that this comes out of Martin Luther King Jr.'s mouth, because he is a voice of authority, of moral authority. We all, I think, by now understand that he saw well into the future and was trying to take us to a better place. And that is certainly a big part of it. And I must say, an overlooked part of it, that, you got to think. It's not enough to hear the slogans. And I try and warn people every election season, Michael, that politicians, I respect them. I think the Assemblywoman knows this. I do respect them. It's not for everybody. It's very hard work. But they are very, very, very skilled at getting people to nod their heads and laugh and agree and shake their hands and vote for them. And a lot of times I beseech them not to abuse that power and that charisma and that ability to be, to bring people along. If you're going to bring people along, you have an obligation to try and really think through, not just what's going to be the simple thing that gets a round of applause and a re-election and a bunch of votes, but the thing that's right, the thing that's hard, and I try and partner with leaders. And I think all of us, to the extent that we're trying to be effective, you tell people up front, this isn't going to be easy. This isn't going to be simple. This isn't going to be something that makes you want to clap, but we've got to do it. It's the only responsible way to move forward. And, I think we, by and large, have a large section of the city who has come to understand that. But, they were talking about it in ancient Rome. They talk about it in the ancient wisdom texts. You can find it in Proverbs. There are people out there who will always tempt you with the simple solution. And like good parents, all of us occasionally have to say no.
Well, you're correct on that. And with the smiles on everybody's face, I think we all can agree. As Dr. King also said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And the three of you have done just extraordinary work in ensuring that things do matter, whether it's commenting and eliciting comments from the political arena, being in the political arena, or being a physician, caring for people and ensuring public health. We are honored that you have joined us this evening for this very special occasion, celebrating Black History Month, but most importantly, celebrating the legacy, the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. And with that, I want to turn back to Consul General Nitzan for some closing remarks. Consul General.
Thank you, Michael. So before we close our program, I wanted to thank our three esteemed honorees, Mr. Lewis, Dr. Easterling, and Assemblymember Bichotte, and everyone actually who for joining us and participating in what has become a tradition over the years. This is our small way of marking Black History Month and the legacy of late Dr. King. But there is one final thing that we need to do, and I would like to say, but first, please, Michael, could you answer your door?
Oh.
There's something you need to see over there.
Really? Okay.
I know that this is a live webinar and we'll wait. Errol, I'm sure that you're familiar with such surprises. So just to say, Michael is completely unaware of what we're about to do or are doing. And Michael will be back shortly, so please stay with us for a few more seconds.
Okay.
Okay. So, Michael, I would like to present one final special award to Rabbi Michael Miller, the Executive Vice President and the CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. Michael has worked tirelessly over 36 years with the JCRC, building bridges, and this event is only a testimony to Michael's work and legacy, building bridges between African American and Jewish communities. He has stood with all communities fighting anti-Semitism, racism, bigotry, and injustice. He has led over 100 missions to Israel, allowing others to see the truth about Israel and Israeli society. He knows the importance of partnerships and has built coalitions where there was once division. So maybe this is and I think I have to add one more thing, that this is the most important thing to say about Michael, and we all know that he's a mensch. We have given this award to many people over the years, but this is the first time it's being bestowed on a member of the Jewish community. So Michael, it is my honor and pleasure, and I'm so happy, the acting consul of Israel in New York, to present you with this award, which reads, February 28th, 2021, in commemoration of the birthday of late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the celebration of Black History Month, trees have been planted in the Martin Luther King Jr. Forest in Israel, recognizing Rabbi Michael Miller, esteemed community leader, treasured colleague, and great friend, for his decades of devoted leadership, remarkable aptitude in building bridges between diverse communities, natural ability to forge new relationships and strengthen old ones, passion towards helping others, and his commitment to the dream of freedom and equality which unites all people. Presented by the Consul General of Israel in New York, the Jewish Community Relations Council, the Jewish National Fund. Michael, Mazel Tov, you're more than deserved for this award. So now you have the last word in this special event.
Well, thank you very much, particularly coming from you and behind the scenes, my dear friend Francine Raub Vogel. But for me to join the array of individuals who have received this award in the past, including those who are on the screen today, Errol Lewis, Rodneyse Bichotte, Dr. Easterling, and my dear friend and brother, Jacques de Graaf, Reverend de Graaf, means a tremendous amount to me. Israel Nitzan, the Consul General, they say acting, he's not acting, he works too hard to be an acting Consul General. If I'm a mensch, he's a super mensch. to receive this from you is exceptionally meaningful. And I'm very, very moved. And it was Noam, my chief operating officer and Israel International Affairs director, who was ringing my doorbell. I was wondering who was ringing my doorbell at 6 o'clock in the evening, and lo and behold, this is now in my possession and will occupy a very significant place on various walls that I have to hang things on. I'm not just one who seeks awards. I thank God I've received very few of them during the course of my 30+ year career. My only responsibility is to get our job done. And thank God JCRC has done that, and most especially done it in partnership with the consulate, with the current consul general and all of his predecessors, and the staff of the Israeli consulate, with our team at JCRC, with organizations such as the Jewish National Fund, and with wonderful friends like Errol Rodneyse, Dr. Easterling, and Rev. Makes it a lot easier. And receiving this is kind of like underscoring all the work that we have accomplished together. As Dr. King said, one last quote from Dr. King, change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. And indeed, we have all struggled together, and we will continue to struggle together. I think that Errol pointed out the segregation that we have even up here in the North in our society. Rodneyse inadvertently mentioned it as well. Well, we have a Jewish month, and we have a Black month, and we have a Hispanic month. We need every day to be in partnership with one another, not in our respective silos, but to tear down those silos and to build a unified society. I think that Dr. King stood for that. The partnership that he had with so many, particularly Rabbi Heschel, is really indicative of what we need to do as a society. So thank you very much for the surprise. I don't get surprised too often. This is a beautiful one. And thank you everybody for your friendship